Hi everybody, my name is Spite, and I don't like sport bikes. That is correct, you heard me right, I do not like sport motorcycles. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't hate them, and I don't think they're bad motorcycles. I just don't like them, and there's a lot of reasons why, and I wanted to talk about it today because I think a lot of people get too lost in the sauce, and they're like, oh, sport bikes are bleeding edge specifications. They have everything that you would want. They're the perfect bike for, you know, carving up a corner and doing all that stuff. And they're not wrong, but there's a lot more to motorcycling than that. And I wanted to talk about it. And I brought out the Aprilia RS660, a motorcycle that I have not spent all that much time with. And if some keen-eyed viewers are out there taking a look, they probably clocked that there are a few modifications to this bike. Stay tuned to that. We've got a whole video throwing some mods on this bike coming out a little later this week. Oh, and before I forget, if you would like to win this here RS660, brand spanking new, hot off the presses, ketchup and mustard mobile, this thing is actually a really great motorcycle. And despite the fact that it's a sport bike, and I don't love sport bikes as much as all the other motorcycles out there, it is an excellent, excellent bike. And if you would like to win it, click the links down below, go to the YammieNoob.co site where you can sign up, go to Yammie Noob merch where every dollar you spend is an entry to win, or go to the new YN Moto store where you can buy all sorts of stuff, tires, helmets, gear, all that stuff for your ride and yourself, and every dollar you spend there is an entry to win. Now, it is getting hot, and I want to get on the road, and away we go. So, before I get too far into what some people are going to view as negativity, let me say some good things about sport bikes as a way to extend an olive branch, so to speak. Sport bikes are excellent motorcycles for their intended purpose. There is nothing better when you're looking to be super aggressive around a racetrack and chase that lap time. There is no better motorcycle. I mean, it's why MotoGP riders don't ride Harleys. It's why they're all on these crazy high performance motorcycles. If they weren't the best at that, they would be on other motorcycles. The MotoGP riders are the best in the world, and so they're using the best equipment for the job, and sport bikes are very clearly the best. Also, sport bikes are where we get a lot of our technology from. We get crazy up and down quick shifters, wheelie control, all of this stuff comes trickle down from racing. Because MotoGP riders are out there chasing the best lap times, they need a little bit of help to do it. You know, despite the fact that they're the best at what they do, they still need a little bit of an electronic edge, and sport bikes give them that in the form of quick shifters, seamless shift for GP. All of these different rider modes and nannies help them manage all that horsepower, and it's because of that that we have all this cool stuff on the street. And I'm not oblivious to that fact. If the world was just Harleys, we would be riding around on 5-speed gearboxes, probably 4-speed gearboxes. All the bikes would be air-cooled, and they wouldn't make more than 100 horsepower. So all of this cool stuff that we love about motorcycling comes largely from sport motorcycles, and I am thankful for that. Now, that being said, let me explain to you why I particularly do not like sport motorcycles. Now, a little bit about my experience with motorcycles. This is before I got involved in Yammie Noob. I had 2 Harleys. I started on Harleys. I got myself a 919, which is a 100 horsepower inline 4 sport naked bike. I got myself a VFR 800, and I had that as I joined the Yammie Noob team. Now obviously I have the DRZ and the SMCR, but the VFR was really my first sport bike. But I had also ridden a CBR 1000 RR. I had ridden a couple of other fully fared bikes like an R6 and so forth. And even then, before I had a lot of experience under my belt, I got him and I was like, I got on him and I was like, this doesn't feel quite right to me. And the first thing that I noticed, the first thing that didn't square well with me was the ergonomics. Now, there is no getting around the fact that sport bike ergonomics are aggressive. There are motorcycles like this RS660 here, which have more mellowed out ergonomics, because at its core, while this is a very aggressive platform, it is still really kind of a street bike. And if you don't believe me, this passenger seat behind me, if you take it off, you don't actually get into a, you know, compartment like you would where you normally could put like your wallet or your phone or anything like that. If you take the rear seat off, what you get is you get a platform, a flat platform that you can bolt a top box to. Aprilia is really meaning for this to be a street bike, or at least they're setting it up a lot like a street bike from the factory. I feel like if you were going to get super committed to racing on this machine, you need to get, you know, clip-ons, you need to get higher rear sets, you need to get a whole lot of modifications to really make this thing a race motorcycle. I think it's closer to, you know, an actual honest-to-goodness, you know, sport bike than something like a Ninja 400 out of the gate, but it's still really a street bike. And as a street motorcycle, this ergonomics package is a pain in the butt to live with, especially if you go with something like a typical 600 with its aggressive gargoyle mode ergonomics, where you're no matter what you're doing, you're tucked in, and if you try to sit up, you're putting all your weight on your wrists. That's not comfortable for me, who is primarily a street rider. I understand why the ergonomics are the way that they are. I understand that they're designed for the top 1% of racers to really get in the pocket, get that aerodynamic edge, and go fast. But as we're seeing here today, most riding that most people are doing on these motorcycles looks a lot like this. We're on a twisty road. I could have a lot of fun on this road if these cars weren't in front of me, but cars are in front of me. This is what happens when you're out riding on the street. You're not going all that fast, not enough to really take advantage of the ergonomics edge and aerodynamics that you get from that tucked position. You just don't. So as street motorcycles, these kind of suck. There is no two ways around it. I know a lot of people out there are like, oh, it works well for me, but you know, maybe you're making sacrifices that you're more willing to make than I am. I unfortunately am not willing to compromise on ergonomics. It's one of the main reasons I got rid of my VFR, because while it did sit very similar to this, I like to take big long rides on my motorcycle, and it's just not all that much fun to do in this position. Now, the next thing that kind of bums me out about these bikes is that they're a pain in the butt to work on. They're a giant pain in the butt. And I'm going to allude to our install that we're doing later this week. So again, check that out if you want die-hard proof, you know, just hard proof, hard facts, time showing you how much of a pain in the butt this is to work on. I put a radiator guard on this motorcycle. To do that, I had to take off this entire left side fairing to put a radiator guard on. Guys, that is a ton of work for a small part. That really tested my patience, I'm not gonna lie, and you'll see it in the video. And it's not just this motorcycle, it's all fully faired motorcycles are a pain in the butt to work on because you gotta dig into all the plastics. Now, I know when you get a race bike, you can get a bunch of quick release D-rings and so forth to make it easier to get all the plastics off, but that's a very specific use case. Generally, there are a ton of screws and a ton of little pins and, you know, those push pins that you have to deal with, those plastic push pins that everybody loves, that always break every time you take one off. One of the little pieces breaks on there. And, you know, maybe there's some armchair mechanics who are like, ah, Spite, I never break any of those push pins. BS. I call BS on that. You break the push pins all the time because by the end of your project, you are like, screw this. I want to be done. I want to go inside. I want to get a drink. I don't want to be working on my motorcycle anymore. You cram the push pin in and it snaps. Don't worry, we've all done it. You can admit it down in the comments. And some people think that is okay. That working on a bike, you know, is tough, and they've accepted the fact that sport bikes are harder to work on because they like the looks. And I got to admit, this is a good looking motorcycle. It's a pain in the butt to work on and service, but it is a good looking bike. The next thing that I don't like about these motorcycles, and this bike does a better job of solving that problem because, like I said, it's a little bit more of a street bike than a race bike, at least in its current setup. Most sport motorcycles, you cannot extract the power out of them on the street. You just can't. Think about something like the R6, where it revs out to what, 15,500 RPM, I think, if I remember correctly. Are you gonna sit there on the street here, like, to do that? This is $7 grand right here on this motorcycle. There's another 7,000 RPM in the R6. Are you gonna ride around like this all the time? No, of course not. You're gonna shift up and ride like a normal person. But on most sport motorcycles, you really need to keep the bike on the boil to make the motorcycle go anywhere. The R6 is so gutless down low. It has nothing for you below 7,000 RPM, where most people spend the majority of their time. It's why when they make a naked bike version of a sport bike, they always end up having these detuned motors that make less power but more torque earlier on in the rev range. They change the gearing so that they make a little bit more power, and they're more fun to ride. For example, take a look at my 919 versus the CBR 900 RR from the 90s. There's a huge difference in what those engines put out, and it's to make the 919 a more rideable motorcycle. This is a more rideable sport bike because it's, you know, super torquey down low. It has a little bit of a build-up where you do have to get it to about 7 grand before it really gets good, but I know that for a fact if you put a tune on here and you deleted the O2 sensors and all that stuff, you could really make some down-low torque out of this because it's a parallel twin. They're just torqueier than inline 4s. But I can hear in the comments already, but Spite, super bikes, R1, S1000 RR, those have so much torque down low. You can really get after it on those motorcycles. Well, can you? Can you really? You sure? Because I tell you what, if you're on a motorcycle where first gear ends at 90 miles an hour, you're on a bike that you probably cannot extract the full performance out of. And if you are, and you're not at a track, you're exceeding some speed limits, my friend. And look, I get it. Everybody wants to have a super fast motorcycle, or at least a motorcycle that makes a lot of power, because it's fun to make a lot of power. But you really got to consider the kind of riding that you're going to do. Most people do this sort of thing more times than they care to count. For example, I did a ride yesterday here in Austin where I rode out a road called Fitzhugh. And I rode out 290, and then I picked up another road called 1323 that led into Willow City. And that's about 70 or 80 miles to get to one stretch of road called the Willow City Loop. Now, the Willow City Loop is a great twisty road, but it took me like an hour and a half of riding to get there. And 1323 looks an awful lot like this. It's an awful lot of just long roads with a couple of curves here and there. Nothing, nothing that you would consider interesting riding. And do you want to ride an hour and a half like this to get to a twisty road? Do you seriously want to ride like that? Because this sucks. This really sucks, I'm not gonna lie. Now, I'm not saying that you need to get yourself a cruiser, because obviously we have other motorcycles. So if you are out there and you're like, I want to get a sport bike because I want power and I want handling and I want technology, definitely take a look at the naked motorcycles out there. And maybe you're like, well, those are kind of ugly, Spite. They're, you know, they look like they're incomplete bikes. Okay, I get it. Yeah, they're not the prettiest looking motorcycles out there. You know, the MT-10 makes 160 horsepower, but it has a face that only a mother could love. I personally like it, but, you know, I like stupid motorcycles. You also have bikes like supermotos, another one of my favorite style of motorcycle, where they have all of the handling characteristics of a sport bike. You know, they can carve up a corner so much more capably than I can. My SMCR, when I took it to the track, all I thought about was, dude, this bike is better at being a bike than I am. I cannot even begin to touch what this thing is capable of. And, you know, people don't think of, well, it's like, it looks like a dirt bike, right? It can't be all that good. It's really good, guys. It's really good. And both of those styles of motorcycles are way more comfortable for this sort of thing. Another thing to consider when you're getting a sport bike like this is heat. It is about, no, it says 86 on the dash right there. It's probably actually closer to about 90 degrees right now. And I'm sitting on a motorcycle that's making 100 horsepower. It's wrapped in plastic. The exhaust is wrapped in plastic. The fans are going. And I tell you right now, I'm dying. This is awful. I can hear the fans pushing air into my legs. I'm sitting in my own little cloud of heat death, basically. Admittedly, once the motorcycle's going again, I'm going down the highway, it's comfortable, right? I'm not overheating again. Although, right here, kind of by my thighs, it is staying pretty darn toasty. Just because of the way that the bike vents its heat, the gas tank heats up quite a bit. But once I get going, it's fine. You know, the heat's not that bad. But generally, the kind of riding that most people are going to do is going to be on the street in traffic. You know, maybe you get out and go on your weekend rides and you can keep the bike moving, but you're going to be in traffic at some point, and you're going to be hunched over like this on a sport bike. The bike is going to be heating up like crazy, and you're going to get home and you're going to be like, nah, I'm good. I'm not going to ride again for another couple of days because I got to recover from that. And there are people out there who daily ride R6s or, you know, R1s or crazy super sports. And if you want to do that, more power to you, man. I'm not going to tell you that you're doing it wrong. But I do think you ought to consider adding a different motorcycle to your stable, just because there's a lot out there. Now, I know that a lot of people are going to be like, oh, of course Spite doesn't like sport bikes. He likes Harleys. Well, I actually like a lot of different kinds of motorcycles. And if there's one takeaway from this video that I want you to get, is that it's all right for you to realize that a certain kind of motorcycle is not for you. Maybe you have come to the conclusion that sport bikes are all you want to ride, and you don't care at all about cruisers. You think they're stupid and slow, and you know what? They are stupid and slow. They just are. But they're not meant to go fast, right? I think that you ought to sit and think about the kind of riding that you want to do, sure, when you're going to buy your motorcycle, but also consider the kind of riding that you think you might want to do. You know, do you want to go out and experience a dirt road? do you want to go out and maybe do some jumps, or do you want to go big miles on two wheels? There are so many different kinds of disciplines of motorcycling that by saying you only like one kind of thing, you're limiting your ability to enjoy all the different kinds of bikes out there. And it's fine. It's completely fine for you to experience this sort of motorcycling and be like, nah, it's okay. It's not for me. I understand it's not for me. That's totally fine. And that's what I'm saying here with sport bikes. I'm like, you know what? Sport bikes aren't my thing, but I will continue to ride them because they're cool. I just won't own them, you know? So go out there, experience all these kinds of bikes, figure out what you really want and what you really like. And don't be afraid to say, you know, that kind of bike, it's just not for me. Because not every style of motorcycle is for you. And you are going to, I guarantee you, if you say, sport bikes aren't for me down in the comments, you're going to get a bunch of neckbeards telling you that you're doing it wrong. Ignore those people because they're doing it wrong. Because chances are there's some squid who only rides a sport bike. And they have no experience. It's not their fault. Well, I mean, it kind of is, but you know, they just haven't experienced all the kinds of things that bikes have to offer. So with that being said, this video is getting a little bit long on us. Remember, if you are a sport bike boy and you want to get yourself the fanciest one out there, I can't think of one that's fancier than this one. Get yourself signed up by clicking the links down below. Get yourself entered to win over on Yammie Noob merch, yammie-noob.co, or the YN Moto store. All of those are great ways to get entered to win. You can join our Discord server where we have a ton of different riders from a ton of different disciplines for you to chat about. And with that, I will catch you guys in the next one.
So real bummer, this video is actually over, but you're in luck. There are hundreds of other Yammie Noob videos you can go and check out. Hit this one right over here. Watch it. Do it for Yammie-chan.